This video will show you 3 ways to transcend your level of awareness. I'll share with you ways to apply these easily into your life so that you're able to raise your vibration and shift your level of consciousness. Welcome back to another video. My name is Aaron and I help people expand their consciousness. Now in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 habits that if you begin to do immediately, you will start to feel a raise in your vibrational set point. You're going to start to feel better and you're going to start to see your life in a completely new way, and it can totally transform your life as it did for me. Now I originally went through my spiritual awakening back in about 2012, and when that happened, everything changed. It was shortly after I learned meditation, and I specifically just wanted to learn meditation because I thought it would be good for getting rid of what is called Adderall, which is what I took for A.D.H.D, which has harsh side effects. So I learned meditation, and within about 2 or 3 days of doing it, I learned how to observe my thoughts rather than trying to control my mind, and that was the game changer for me. From that point going forward, it was like everything began to change. I started to observe my thoughts, I started to observe my beliefs, and I started to disassociate from prior conditioning, and I started to feel better a majority of the time. It's almost like I let go of a whole bunch of baggage that was keeping my quote-unquote vibration held down, and by doing that, it raised me up and I started to feel good. I remember that I felt good like walking around, and I felt so different that I thought that it was a feeling that was going to go away. I remember it was like, this feels just too good to be true, and I was like, when's it going to go away? When's it going away? And that feeling never really went away. It just became my base point feeling. And it was like I was feeling at a 5 or a 6 out of 10, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling like a 7 or 8 out of 10. And since then, it's been something I've been able to really integrate into my life, and now that 10 is now like a 12 or a 15, and I can spike up and over it depending on my level of being or my state of being. But that's what I want to share with you today, is 3 habits that will help you raise your vibrational set point so that you feel better a majority of the time. Now understand that when it comes to levels of consciousness, the form or the what I normally use is from the book, is a chart from the book called Power versus Force, and you'll see on this chart right now that there's different emotions that have different states of being. You could think of this also as a different level of consciousness, and think of it like whatever thought loops that we're in, whatever we're thinking of and feeling, it's normally a thought loop that'll keep perpetuating itself. So the idea is that as we move up our vibrational state of being, we transcend the levels of consciousness and we get higher and higher. Now, I want to just point out a couple things on the scale. You'll notice that in the middle, you'll see neutrality, or above all the lower emotions. Neutrality is the ability to observe rather than react. And having that neutral standpoint is one of the easiest and best things you can do for transcending all the lower emotions. And when you let go of those lower emotions, you will feel better a majority of the time. Now, that's why the first habit you must develop if you want to transcend your level of consciousness is the habit of observation. Being able to observe your thoughts rather than react to them, because as you observe your thoughts, everything begins to change because you begin to relate to the world in a completely new way. You see, we are brought up, grown up, and we walk around and we think, and we're constantly relating to the outer environment. We're constantly reacting to the outer environment. And it's a game changer when all of a sudden we don't identify with the ego and we start to observe. It loses its negative charge that was there. Whatever negative charge that says, oh, this is happening to me, that begins to go away and you immediately start to feel better. So the habit of observation is the biggest game changer as well, because then we learn that it's not so much about trying to control our thoughts. And that was what me for the first 4 or 5 or about 2 or 3 days of meditating. I felt so much resistance because I was trying to control my mind. Shortly after I learned about the law of attraction, so I'm sitting there and I'm trying not to attract those things to me, if I let my mind wander. So what I did is I simply observed my thoughts, I allowed them to be there, and that was the paradox, because then the thoughts started to go away and I started to open up a space within me, and everything started to feel differently. So if you start to observe your thoughts, it's one of the biggest game changers. That's why I made it at the first one on this list. And the second thing that you must do is around forgiveness. Now, this is something and a habit that you can develop by realizing, first off, everyone will always make their decisions based on their own level of rationalization. I know that sounds like a kind of a fancy term, but realize that if anybody ever does anything to you, they're doing it from their own perspective and they're justifying it in their own way. Meaning that we're all technically very similar, we're all very conditioned by our environment, and sometimes people do things out of limiting beliefs, They do things because they think it's going to better themselves in some way, even though we can't see it. And this is when you can have discernment. Maybe you can realize that you're not going to be around certain people as much, but at the same time realize that when you begin to let go of all of that baggage, of all the blame and the guilt, that's when you will transcend your level of consciousness as well. I grew up being abused by my ex-stepmom, and because of that, it was like up until the age of 15 when my dad divorced her, it was like I had no freedom at all between 9 and 15. I wasn't able to have friends. I wasn't able to, really, I got in trouble and I wouldn't be able to go to school activities, which is what I enjoyed because it got me away from being home. And I remember that after the divorce and at 15, all of a sudden I had all this freedom and I was able to actually like have friends and eat what I wanted to eat instead of like, you know, be very skinny because I was malnutrition because I wasn't allowed to eat very much. As I let go of all of that anger and all that guilt, I realized that she was most likely abused. And even if she wasn't abused, she was coming at it from her own frame of reference, and she had rationalized it in her own head. And anybody that abuses someone else normally is not, normally, almost all the time, they're not emotionally happy. They're normally pretty miserable on the inside as well. Having that awareness allowed me to really forgive her and to really forgive myself as well. And it made it so much easier for me to transcend all the lowers emotion, all the past, and as I did that, I felt my vibration raise. I felt like I was really able to let it go. I was able to get positive meaning at it. And from a deeper level, I really believe that a lot of that pain I went through growing up led me to having a spiritual awakening. And you may notice that for yourself. If you're going through a spiritual awakening, you may have been through a lot of pain growing up. And understand that that's kind of a part of the process, and that you can reframe it by knowing that that's just a part of the process. It's a part of a larger vision, and as you transmute it into something positive now, that's where everything really begins to change. Third habit for raising and transcending your level of consciousness has to do with reminding yourself that you are an immortal spiritual being having a temporary human experience. Now, this is something that I do because it really puts things into perspective. If I'm mad about something, or if I'm starting to get triggered about something, I can bring it back to the core and realize that we are going on a ball on an earth, or whatever, you know, whatever shape it is, and we are spinning through space very quickly, and with that, everything is brought into place perfectly for us to be alive right now. So we can in a way be grateful, but understand that beyond that, we are an immortal spiritual being, that if we exist now, we will always exist, and that when we tap into this, it really reminds us of the larger aspect of who we are. It's almost like we take our awareness from this and we bring it to this. Now, this is also empowering to know because many people feel threatened. They feel threatened being alive. They feel threatened with their life. That's coming from identification with the ego. And when you remind yourself that you, in a way, have logged in, part of the reason of life, I believe, is to forget who we are when we're growing up and when we're born, so that we can remember who we are. We can awaken to who we are. And as we do that, that's part of the purpose of life, is to awaken to more of who we already are. Now, that's something I think can really transform the way you see yourself, can really transform your level of consciousness, and that's why I wanted to make this video today. So the other part of this is understanding the power of raising our own vibration. When we raise our vibrational state of being, we elevate our consciousness. That's why I've created a free MP3 that will show you exactly how to raise your vibrational set point. It's something that is absolutely free. You can download it in the description box below. I actually just created it. It's something I think is amazing. I think it's going to be something that really adds value to you, so feel free to download it in the description box below. And other than that, as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to like this video if you guys liked it, subscribe if you guys haven't already. Also hit that little notification here so that you guys can see the daily vids that I do. And other than that, as always, I will see you guys on the next vid. Peace, much love, and namaste.